So today, we're doing an explainer that's a little different. We're actually going to put on our clinical psychologist hats to decode a very specific and frankly, super common behavior. From the outside, it looks like absolute kindness, right? It looks like you're just being this wonderfully accommodating person. But clinically speaking, it's actually a hidden trap. We are diving deep into the psychology of people-pleasing. I want you to think about this for a second. Have you ever said yes when every single fiber of your being desperately wanted to say no? This is the defining hook of our composite patient profile today. We're looking at everyday people who say yes to taking on, an extra project at work just to avoid a minor conflict, or people who literally apologize just for taking up physical space in a room. It is an exhausting way to live, and today we're going to unpack exactly why it happens. Okay, let's dive into section 1, the diagnosis. We're calling this fake kindness. Imagine I'm holding a patient's clinical chart right now. Let's just read through the daily symptoms together. Agreeing to things that physically and mentally exhaust them. Check. Apologizing constantly, even when they literally haven't made a mistake. Check. Avoiding conflict at all absolute costs, even if it means totally throwing their own needs under the bus. And this chronic, constant, humming worry about disappointing others. If you or someone you know exhibits these symptoms, the diagnosis is not having too much kindness. So what's actually driving all of this? Under the surface, the core engine of all those symptoms is fear. But, and this is absolutely key, it's not the fear of being perceived as rude. It's an acute, deep-seated fear of losing approval. For our typical patient, somewhere in their psychological development, the concept of approval became completely and inextricably linked to their own fundamental safety. Which brings us to section 2, the root cause of this behavior. It's actually a survival strategy. At its very core, people-pleasing is an ingrained survival strategy. Our patient's brain learned, probably really early on in life, that being accepted, being incredibly useful, or being perfectly agreeable was just the absolute best way to reduce tension in their environment. Being easy to deal with meant they stayed safe. It meant they maintained a connection, so the brain simply adopted to protect them. And over time, that adaptation solidifies into a subconscious mantra. Keep people happy and you'll stay safe. This invisible script just runs in the background of our patient's mind during literally every interaction. It becomes so automatic that they don't even realize they're running a safety algorithm. They just think they're, casually responding to an email or answering a partner's question. But because this strategy becomes so intensely automatic, something really tragic happens. The patient completely stops asking themselves this fundamental, totally healthy psychological question: what do I want? The connection to their own desires and their own boundaries just gets completely severed. And what takes its place? It's immediately replaced by this really anxious question: what will make everyone else comfortable? This is the exact mental short circuit that creates such intense guilt. Our patient isn't devoid of personal needs. It's just that expressing those needs feels genuinely dangerous to them. Saying no feels selfish. Disagreeing feels like risking their connection to others. So they just default to managing everyone else's comfort to guarantee their own safety. Moving on to section 3, the fallout from all this. We call this the resentment trap. There is a crucial difference between being liked and being respected. Being liked, well, that often involves adapting to expectations and kind of shape-shifting. Being respected, on the other hand, requires authentic boundaries. Let's analyze how this plays out in a relationship. If you're a chronic people pleaser, your desperate need for approval fundamentally weakens the trust in your couple, your romantic relationship. Why? Because you are constantly shape-shifting to avoid rejection. Deep down, you know your partner is loving a fake version of you, the version that never says no. You can't even trust their love because they don't know the real you. They're just loving a mask. And this dynamic creates what we call the exhaustion cycle. It's a tragic behavioral loop. First, the patient overextends. Then they overgive, secretly hoping others will finally value them the way they value everyone else. Then they overexplain any tiny minor boundary they actually try to set. And finally, they disconnect from themselves entirely. Part of them begins to feel totally unseen, unappreciated, and just profoundly drained. They give and give, but it just breeds deep, hidden resentment. Now, section 4. We're at a crossroads here. Is it fear, or is it a genuine need for love? When your behavior is driven by the fear of rejection, external validation becomes almost like an addiction. Every compliment, every little sign of approval acts like a quick hit of a drug. It offers this temporary relief from the anxiety of being abandoned. But a true need for love, that is about seeking a secure, genuine connection. Temporary relief from a compliment is absolutely not the same thing as building actual self-worth. And eventually, constantly performing for that validation just becomes totally exhausting. Which brings us to the really painful, tragic irony of our patient's entire strategy. Approval earned through self-sacrifice never feels fully secure. By constantly sacrificing themselves to keep other people happy, they pretty much guarantee they'll never actually feel securely loved. The very strategy they are using to seek safety is the exact thing preventing them from ever finding it. Wild, right? So how do we fix it? Section 5, the treatment plan, assertiveness. Here is our clinical framework for reclaiming your life. First, we literally have to accept that disappointing people is just a normal part of being a human being. You can't build a real life while shapeshifting. Next, we have to work on separating guilt from actual wrongdoing. Then, we stop measuring our self-worth through the reactions of others. Universal permanent agreement is an impossible standard. And finally, we have to learn to tolerate discomfort. I want to pause on this because this concept is often the major psychological breakthrough for our patients. People pleasers feel guilty simply for having boundaries, but we have to reframe that. Listen to this. Guilt is not always a signal that you did something bad. Sometimes feeling guilty is simply proof that you are successfully breaking an old, ingrained survival pattern. It is just the feeling of your brain resisting change. It is not a sign that you should retreat. Replace that guilt with a healthy sense of self-assertion. To break that pattern, our patient has to bravely face a completely new reality. They must tolerate the temporary discomfort of saying no, the discomfort of being misunderstood by someone who is super used to them always saying yes, and the very acute discomfort of not rushing in to fix everyone else's emotions. Because remember, that discomfort, it's temporary. But abandoning yourself, that becomes permanent damage if you repeat it long enough. Let me tell you a story about a patient who finally put this into practice. Let's call her Sarah. For years, Sarah said yes to absolutely every extra shift, terrified of being disliked. But when she finally set a boundary and tolerated that initial crushing guilt, you know what happened? The sky didn't fall. Instead, she found true connection. She realized that real kindness actually includes honesty. She didn't lose her friends. She finally gained the freedom to show up as her real self. She learned that self-respect and the ability to care about others can absolutely coexist without disappearing in the process. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought for our explainer today. When you are faced with that moment of tension, the next time someone asks something of you, what will you choose? Will you choose the temporary discomfort of setting a healthy boundary or the permanent pain of abandoning yourself? Think about it. The freedom is entirely yours.